I'm not an expert on Hispanic culture or the many traditions across Central and South America, but patriotism appears to be a strong cultural value. Statistics show that about 19% of the U.S. population is Latino, and roughly 19% of our military forces are also Latino. Many soldiers strongly connect with their heritage and culture, but the military creates its own culture that helps everyone get along. Military personnel don't really care about anyone's background, just do your job well. Since I never really thought about it much before, I'm becoming more interested in Latin American history and legends. My friend Caesar moved here from Venezuela and also lived in Panama for several years. I asked him about this recently, and he said that everywhere you travel, people will share their chupacabra stories. The way he said it makes it sound as common as discussing the weather. Then there's El Cucho, a shape-shifting boogeyman creature whose stories Latino parents use to scare children into good behavior. There's also one famous legend that frightens those who grew up hearing it, especially people who claim they've experienced it firsthand. For some, it's in the same group as El Cucho, just a folk story used to make sure kids come home before dark. But according to people like these two veterans, this legend should be taken as a serious warning. If you hear a woman crying, stay away from the water. These are true stories of American servicemen who encountered an entity known as La Llorona. Project, huh? Just like clockwork. See, there she goes again. I told you, every night, Sergeant. I'm just glad you're here with me. Why is that? Because now I know I'm not crazy. What kind of strange woman goes around wailing like that every night? Always around 3 a.m. too. Maybe she needs help, mental help most likely. But just in case, why don't you go check it out? I'll stay here and watch. For quite some time, the United States military has kept bases in South America. They have several installations across various allied countries where American troops train with and support local military forces. A former Army National Guardsman was deployed to one of these bases, the Soto Cano Air Force Base in Honduras during summer 2019. This Army National Guardsman writes, "I've never experienced anything like Bigfoot, shadow people, UFOs, haunted barracks, etc., but I did have one weird experience. It was the Sunday before Memorial Day when I heard something that reminded me of it. Some kids were playing outside my house and one scraped their knee badly. The scream she made, dude, I don't scare easily, but it made me stop what I was doing. Imagine the most painful scream, pure agony. That's what I heard 4 years ago on temporary duty to Honduras. I was stationed at Soto Cano Air Force Base in summer 2019. Being one of the few enlisted and most junior, I got volunteered for night shift duty. It was pretty boring. My job was logging overnight events, keeping contact with other units, being there for emergencies, and patrolling around the office building. Outside of training events, very little happened. I was literally paid to watch Netflix and play Total War for 3 months. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. Around 3 a.m., I would hear sobbing from somewhere outside the office. It would normally last about 30 minutes and was always a woman crying. I thought I was going crazy until I had to track nighttime training exercises. Since there were many moving parts, one of the NCOs would join me, and he would hear the sobbing too. Finally, after several days of this, we had enough. He told me to investigate the noise and report back what I found. It was around 3:15 a.m. when I walked out of the office. I lit my cigarette and took a few drags before walking toward the noise. Strangely, as I walked in that direction, the sobbing seemed to move further away from me, almost like whatever was making the noise was luring me away from the safety of our lit office building. I stopped near a shack with some chicken coops and put out my cigarette. I scanned the empty cabins for anything, any movement, anything out of place, anyone, but there was nobody besides myself outside. Feeling weirded out, I lit another cigarette and walked down the road, still following these sounds until I stopped by a drainage pipe at the road's edge, and the noises stopped. I'm not just saying the sobbing stopped, all the noises stopped. The cicadas, other nighttime sounds, everything. It was like I'd stepped into a vacuum, like someone flipped a switch and time stopped. I stood there taking in the silence. What the hell was that? It was creepy as hell because I was the only person out there at 3 a.m. I felt my hair stand up and ran away from that drain pipe, cigarette in mouth, back to the chicken coops. I remember them squawking at me while I looked back at the road's end. There was no one there, but the noises had started again. Now I'm thoroughly creeped out. I put out my second cigarette and ran back to the office. My sergeant asked what happened, and I told him we were just hearing nearby chickens. He seemed doubtful and laughed it off, saying, "Chickens, huh? Those are some weird-ass birds." The next morning, nothing was said and he didn't log it. Neither of us spoke about it until I got home and drilled with my home unit. One of my best friends, we'll call him Junior, was from Puerto Rico. I told Junior about it over drinks after drill. He looked at me like he saw a ghost and said, "You didn't hear a woman crying, man, because if you did, then you're going to die soon." I asked why, and he told me about La Llorona. Apparently, if you hear her wailing, then you or someone you know will die soon or experience something horrible. That's interesting because only a few nights after hearing this woman, I was participating in cross-training with some Marines. We were sling-loading heavy loads to helicopters at night without night vision goggles. On the last round, sometime between 2:45 and 3 a.m., something happened. Helicopter blades create static electricity from air friction, which means the ground hookup team needs a grounding person. The grounding person holds a metal pole against the aircraft to make touching it safe. Everyone on the team must watch the grounding person. If he lets go, no one touches the helicopter because the charge it generates can kill you. Due to helicopter instability, our grounding person couldn't get a good ground and let go just as I was about to hook up the load. If not for my sergeant, I would have been fried. He pulled my plate carrier back and we both fell as several tons of helicopter dipped down to where my head was and hovered inches from my face before rebounding and flying off into the night. I'm not very superstitious, but hindsight is 20/20. Considering what I experienced the nights before and never hearing the sobbing again, it certainly sent chills down my spine. Whatever was out there at 3 a.m. was real. I heard it, my sergeant heard it, even other soldiers on shift heard it. But none of us have any explanation. This next story appears in R.S. Russo's book, Odd and Chilling Encounters. A U.S. Marine writing under the name Chirio Martinez recalled something disturbing that happened just before enlisting. He writes, "It was during summer when I decided to visit Mexico to see my family. I was about to join the Marine Corps, so my mother wanted me to see family just in case something bad happened. I was with my pregnant girlfriend, who would later become my wife and then ex-wife. Since she was pregnant, I didn't want to leave her alone, so I bought her a ticket to come along. Her being Caucasian with blonde hair and hazel eyes made everyone around my grandma's house curious, and lots of extended family came to see the beautiful American girl. One of my aunts, who I knew was into paranormal stuff, brought up La Llorona, the wailing woman. My mom quickly told my aunt to be quiet since she knew it would get me both interested and scared. But I pushed my aunt to continue. I was going to be a Marine and couldn't let this silly myth scare me. She proceeded to tell us about how whenever she slept over at my grandma's house, if she stayed up late enough, she would hear her wails, the wails of La Llorona. Later that night, my parents decided my girlfriend and I should stay at our old house where I'd grown up. The house was being worked on, so bedrooms had no doors or working lights. Once inside, we had to use a candle and flashlight for light. As night went on, my girlfriend and I stayed up talking and eventually fell asleep. I don't know exactly what time, but something woke me up. As I was debating closing the window right above our heads, I heard a long wail. I didn't have a cell phone, and my watch was really cheap, so I couldn't tell the time. But I heard it, a long, distorted wail, a woman crying. I could distinctly hear the old raspiness in her voice, like she'd been yelling so long that her throat was giving out. I was both excited and scared at the same time. What confused me was that her wail sounded like it was playing through an old gramophone. After listening for a bit, I could make out what she was saying. She was crying her trademark, "I, mis hijos," or, "Oh, my children." That wail made her famous with most people living in rural Mexico. The wails started growing louder, making it seem like she was slowly heading toward us. There's a myth that if you hear the wails close, she's actually far away, but if you hear them very far, she might be somewhere near you. My girlfriend started stirring. She had this incredulous look and said, "What the hell is that?" I motioned for her to be quiet and listen. Another loud wail passed by. It felt like it was echoing inside the house. My girlfriend started shaking, clearly terrified. I could feel tears running down her face onto my arm. The wailing sounds continued getting closer until it sounded like this woman was right outside our window. At this point, we were both terrified. I pulled the covers over us and tried to remain as still as possible. The wails eventually faded out, but just as we thought she had gone, we heard something viciously fighting and slamming against our outside door. My girlfriend had grown attached to this stray dog that used to walk around my grandma's farm. He would always sleep by the outside door. I figured he was fighting with another dog. The dogs fought for a good minute, slamming against the door, snarling and barking at each other. Then as suddenly as this fighting started, it stopped. We were too scared to get out of bed and eventually fell back asleep. The following morning, we walked outside to find our stray dog. He was always by the door waiting for us, but he was gone. The dirt was clearly stirred up from a fight that happened the night before, but we never saw that dog the rest of the trip. This all happened in 2008. I haven't been back to Mexico ever since. As shown by these two men, the legend of La Llorona is one of the most popular stories in Latin American folklore. Some historians believe La Llorona's origins trace back to ancient Aztec mythology. When Christopher Columbus arrived in 1492, it was only a matter of time before Imperial Spain's forces clashed with the Aztecs. Controlling 80,000 square miles and boasting a population of 5 to 6 million people, the Aztec Empire was a formidable obstacle to Spain's Central American colonization. About a decade before the Aztecs ever saw a Spanish soldier, something strange happened in their capital city. In 1509, Tenochtitlan residents were awakened at night by an unnerving sound, the painful mourning cries of a woman. They searched but nobody ever found the wailing woman. In some accounts, she was heard crying out, "My children, we must flee far away from the city." In others, she reportedly said, "My children, where shall I take you?" Night after night, this mysterious woman wandered the darkened capital streets. Then one night, the screaming stopped. In February 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés landed on the Yucatan coast to begin his march on Tenochtitlan. By appealing to hatred for Aztec rule among regional tribes, Cortés recruited many into his army. By the time he reached Tenochtitlan's gates, his small handful of Spaniards stood alongside 200,000 indigenous warriors. In the bloody siege that followed, an estimated 250,000 people died. With Tenochtitlan's fall in 1521, the Spanish Empire established itself as ruler over the Americas. About 30 years after the Aztec Empire's fall, Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagun began documenting indigenous culture. During interviews with native speakers, many former Tenochtitlan residents, Bernardino became fascinated by repeated tales of a ghostly crying woman. Indigenous people often referenced a deity known as Cihuacotl, a goddess of Aztec mythology associated with childbirth, fertility, and motherhood. Cihuacotl is often depicted as a fierce skull-faced woman brandishing a shield and spear. According to native people, she was also known to carry a crib or cradle. While often worshipped in Aztec culture, there's a darker side to Cihuacotl that links her appearances to childhood death, particularly child murder. In this regard, Cihuacotl is said to be a spirit that comes to mourn children's deaths. Many children were killed during the Spanish invasion. Whether stories of this ancient goddess and future stories of La Llorona are the same remains to be seen. But they share commonality: both entities are known to prey on young children. Many children raised in Latin America are familiar with a tragic story about a young woman named Luisa. Luisa lived during Spanish dominion over the Americas. When Don Nuno de Montes Claros, a wealthy Spanish nobleman, first saw her, he fell madly in love with Luisa, and she was equally smitten. Noblemen were forbidden from marrying lower-class members, so Luisa and Don Nuno married in secret. Over following years, they managed to live a relatively happy life away from public view. Luisa gave birth to 3 children, and Don Nuno visited them in their small home, disguising himself as a laborer. Everything changed when a Spanish noblewoman arrived from Madrid. Don Nuno's faithfulness began wavering. Since his marriage was secret, he took advantage of appearing as an available bachelor. One day, Luisa overheard some town women talking about the Don's upcoming wedding to the woman from Madrid. Luisa was stunned. On the wedding day, she snuck onto Don Nuno's estate where the event was held. She watched heartbroken as Don Nuno raised a glass and proposed a toast to their new future, with the woman from Madrid. Feeling lost, betrayed, and hopeless, Luisa quietly slipped away and made her way home to her 3 children. No one knows why she did it. Some say it's because they looked so much like their father. But when she returned home, possessed with rage, Luisa grabbed a knife and murdered her 3 small children. Luisa was tried for murder and condemned to death. But this wasn't the end. From that day forward, Luisa's spirit, dressed in white, is said to wander all over Latin American provinces, trapped in eternal mourning for her family's loss. Her cries are considered a terrible omen. Anyone unfortunate enough to hear them is doomed to die within a week. The most common La Llorona story version involves a woman leading her children to a nearby river before drowning them. This version aligns with the spirit's connection to water, where she continues to lure unsuspecting children before dragging them beneath the surface. The La Llorona story is often used by parents who want their children to think twice about playing near water or staying out late after dark. Because of this, many simply write off the story as another folk tale. But the stories shared by these American servicemen are among thousands that say otherwise. Did you grow up hearing stories about La Llorona? Oh man, La Llorona, absolutely. Every kid in my neighborhood knew about her. My abuela used to tell me the story to keep me from wandering off near the river at night. In my research, I found there are different versions of the story. Which version did you hear as a kid? The classic one: a woman drowns her kids in a river and now she's doomed to wander crying and searching for them. Some people say she'll try to take you, thinking you're one of her children. Have you ever thought you heard her as a kid? Definitely. Any strange sound at night near water and we'd all swear it was La Llorona. Now as an adult, I'm more skeptical, but the story still gives me the creeps. Would you say La Llorona is a popular story in the Hispanic community in general? Oh, definitely. It's like a universal thing. Whether you're from Mexico, Central America, or South America, everyone knows some version of La Llorona. It's more than just a scary story, it's part of our culture. Talk to anyone and they will tell you their own La Llorona story. Chupacabra is another one, like we talked about. It's a good idea in any case to avoid straying too close to water when it's dark.